Illidan Stormrage, the Lord of Shadows and former ruler of Outland, is a character that is known by many, but understood by few. His pursuits and lust for power and arcane mastery inevitably forced his people to turn against him and label him as the betrayer, as well as imprisoning him for 10,000 years until the events of the Third War. However, to make sense of Stormrage's actions, we must first delve deep into his character to understand his thought process, and that is why in today's video, I am here to share with you all 10 facts about Illidan Stormrage the Betrayer. Unlike Malfurion, Illidan Stormrage was born with amber eyes, which at the time, according to the Night Elves, meant that he was to behold a great destiny in his lifetime. Amber eyes for a Night Elf also signified that he would have inherent druidic potential. However, in Illidan's youth, as he trained alongside his twin brother Malfurion in an attempt to master the druidic forces as his brother had, his impatience and immediate lust for power caused him to turn towards magic and sorcery instead of pursuing his supposed fate of becoming a druid like his brother. During the events of the War of the Ancients, Azshara's treachery became known to the Night Elves. She and the Highborn planned on opening a portal which would allow the demonic forces of the Burning Legion, as well as the fallen titan Sargeras, entrance into the mortal world of Azeroth, thus securing another world that would be under the control of the Burning Legion. Trusting his brother Malfurion, Illidan was convinced to leave his queen and instead follow his brother in fouling Queen Azshara's plans. However, in time, Malfurion and much of the other Night Elves realized that their adversaries were too powerful to fall in combat. Whereas the Night Elves struggled to simply maintain their ground, the Legion's numbers did not seem to diminish as the horde of minions continued to flood over the Night Elves. Malfurion was appalled by their unbridled power and strength, while Illidan admired it, envied it. Malfurion suggested that they destroy the Well of Eternity themselves in order to end the invasion, but Illidan was horrified and even angered by the idea, since the well was the source of all his magic and was far too dear a price for him to pay just to simply destroy a few demons. It was then that the satyr Xavius seized this opportunity to exploit Illidan's confusion by planting seeds of distrust in his mind, which made the young Night Elf turn to the Legion in order to seek the mighty power of the demons. While in his mind, what he was doing right then and there was to help defeat the Burning Legion in the long run, he actually helped them by giving Sargeras the Demon Soul to make the opening for the portal. Ever since he was young, Illidan had strong feelings for Tyrande, a priestess in the Sisters of Elune. He so desired to impress her that he often acted without thinking, particularly with magic, and he never realized that these displays of his power weren't quite what she was looking for in a mate, which is why she chose Malfurion over him. Xavius knew of Illidan's desire to please Tyrande and used this to his advantage by darkening Illidan's thoughts and convincing the young Night Elf that if he were to gain unmatched powers and kill Malfurion, that there would be no one else to stand between him and Tyrande. Although still hesitant even with Xavius' influence, the sight of Tyrande in the arms of his brother Malfurion shattered his final ties to the Night Elf defenders, and he supposedly defected to the Burning Legion. With this thought spurred in his mind, Illidan feigned an allegiance to Azshara and Manaroth. He still lusted to gain power that would be unmatched in the eyes of his allies and enemies. With this motivating his actions, Illidan journeyed to Zinajadi and was eventually brought before Sargeras himself, who quickly discovered that Stormrage's plan was to obtain the Demon Soul for the Legion. The fallen titan and lord of the Legion, very pleased with this idea, gave Illidan a gift in return for his allegiance by burning the Night Elf's eyes out. Arcane tattoos then began to cover his body, and his eyes were then replaced with orbs of mystical fire, which allowed the betrayer to see all forms of magic. Azshara, fascinated by the new Illidan but still cautious, then sent Captain Varothan to accompany Illidan in his search for the Demon Soul. When Azshara's plans to summon Sargeras into Azeroth had failed, the spell that was being channeled by the Highborn was thrown into chaos, which caused a great sundering, also known as the First Cataclysm, which blasted the lands of Kalimdor across the world into smaller lands. After this sundering, Illidan, who had filled 7 vials with water from the Well of Eternity before it exploded, poured 3 of them into a small tranquil lake in an attempt to create another Well of Eternity. Although he succeeded, his joy was short-lived when Malfurion, Tyrande, and the rest of the Kaldorei leadership discovered what he was doing. Unable to accept that his own brother had committed such treachery, Malfurion tried to explain to Illidan the folly of his ways. Malfurion tried to tell Illidan that the magic was chaotic by nature and that it could only bring about destruction so long as it existed, but Illidan refused to listen. So consumed by the possibility of the power that he could gain from this new Well of Eternity, Illidan claimed that the magic would be needed should the Burning Legion ever return, when in reality, it is what drew the attention of the Legion in the first place. Illidan's selfishness and lack of remorse brought Malfurion to his senses, which caused him to rage at his brother, understanding now that Illidan was lost forever to the magic's sway. He then ordered his own brother to be imprisoned deep below Hyjal, in a jail kept far from sight and mind. After being in prison for 10,000 years, Illidan was finally released by Tyrande, who had slaughtered the Night Elf guards that were tasked to keep a constant vigil over the betrayer. With his love for her undampened, even through the millennia of his confinement, Illidan agreed to help her and her people against the Legion. The young Night Elf led a group of soldiers through Felwood to hunt down the Legion, but in his journey, he met a human that reeked of undeath known as Arthas, who at the time was the champion of the Lich King. The two warriors engaged in combat, but saw it as futile since they were both equally matched. Illidan stopped the duel and demanded to know why Arthas had tracked him. The former paladin responded by telling Illidan about the Skull of Gul'dan, a demonic artifact that was the source of the corruption of Felwood. He also explained that if the artifact were to be destroyed, that the corruption of the forest would halt entirely. Illidan, still cautious of the words that have been ushered by the Death Knight, chose not to trust Arthas, but nevertheless sought out the skull and its power anyway. After fighting the skull, Illidan recklessly shattered the demonic seal and used the skull's power for his own in an effort to not only gain more power, but to also redeem himself in the eyes of Tyrande. However, when Tyrande and Malfurion saw the newly transformed Illidan and realized that he had traded his soul for more power, they turned away with disgust and despair. Malfurion once again, enraged at his brother, banished him from the forest. After the Legion's defeat, Kil'jaeden offered Illidan one final chance to serve him, by destroying the Frozen Throne. Ner'zhul had grown far too powerful for Kil'jaeden to control, and Illidan was tasked with the duty of removing him from his throne in exchange for more power and magic than he could ever dream of. His initial plan was to use the Eye of Sargeras to break apart the polar ice cap and destroy Icecrown, as well as the Frozen Throne, but his plan was foiled when Malfurion and Mayev's Shadowsong disrupted his spell. His second plan was to rally his forces of Outland together under his command and march upon Icecrown. Even with Vaj and Kael'thas at his side, however, his forces were inevitably defeated by that of both Anub'arak and the Lich King. After seeing that they could not destroy the Frozen Throne, they retreated back to Outland, leaving a number of Kael'thas' soldiers scattered and lost in the continent of Northrend. These elves that were left to die on the Frozen Continent were hunted down by Arthas and his legions and raised into undeath. They would now be known as the Dark Fallen. In the Burning Crusade, Illidan knows that Kil'jaeden had not forgotten of his failure to destroy the Frozen Throne. In the manual for the expansion, it stated that he greatly anticipated an offense from the Legion and is prepared accordingly. One of the ways that Illidan had prepared was through creating new Fel Orcs to fight for him, by using the blood of the imprisoned Magtheridon. However, he also had a chance to ally himself with Shattrath City against their common enemy, the Burning Legion. But for some reason, or perhaps no reason at all, he decided to wage war on the city instead. Perhaps the goal of the attack was to strengthen Illidan's position in Outland, but in the end, it had the complete opposite effect, since the attack on Shattrath actually caused a large number of Blood Elves to desert both Kael'thas and Illidan and instead join forces with the Naaru. These Blood Elves are now known as the Scryers. In the Well of Eternity, the 5-man level 85 dungeon introduced in patch 4.3, a player can encounter an Easter egg with Illidan after they defeat Perotharn, a fellow Highborn soldier and friend of Xavius, the High Counselor to Queen Azshara. After the player in Illidan managed to defeat the Satyr, Illidan has a bonus line of dialogue with no sound file that he will say if you are wielding the War Goliaths of Azeroth. When Illidan led his armies on a full assault against the Frozen Throne, he engaged Arthas in single combat in an effort to stop the fallen paladin from merging with Ner'zhul atop the Icy Pinnacle. However, after an intense battle, Illidan inadvertently left himself open to attack, which Arthas gladly took advantage of. The Death Knight sliced open the Demon Hunter's chest with Frostmourne, leaving Illidan to bleed out in the snow. Before he walked away to become the Lord of Undeath, he turned back and told Illidan, "Leave Azeroth, and never return." In the conversation between Malfurion and Remulus during the Burning Crusade, Malfurion says the following: "I am afraid that the loss to Arthas proved to be his breaking point. Madness embraced him. He plays the events of that time in his mind, 1,000 times per day. But in his mind, he is the victor, and Arthas is the one who is utterly defeated. He is too far gone, old friend." Although the exact implications of this conversation are not quite known, some players believe that this is proof that Illidan's defeat by Arthas is one of the major events that led to his madness and downfall in the Burning Crusade. This can also be supported with another line by Illidan Stormrage himself. At the beginning of the Battle of the Crimson Watch, Illidan shouts out the following: "What manner of fool dares stand before Illidan Stormrage? Soldiers, destroy these insects." After waves of demons and blood elves attack the party and the players manage to defeat them, a soldier named Torloth the Magnificent engages the players. After Torloth falls, Illidan shouts out the following: "So, you have defeated the Crimson Sigil. You now seek to challenge my rule? Not even Arthas could defeat me, yet you dare to even harbor such thoughts? Then I say to you, come, come, the Black Temple awaits." This can be perceived two ways. The first way is that he can literally base the definition of defeat with death, as in Arthas spared him, therefore Arthas did not defeat him. Another theory that adds on to the previous conversation with Malfurion states that Illidan began losing his mind after his defeat by the hand of Arthas, not believing it himself, and therefore, according to Malfurion, replaying the events of that time in his mind 1,000 times a day, and therefore being too far gone. However, in Legion, we will see his true intentions.